We've all seen those 100 days videos where someone boots up a brand new world and tries to beat the game for the first time, and build a cool looking base in the process. But I was curious to see how much you can actually get done in 100 days in a pre-existing world. I've had this world for about 6 months, and in that time we've managed to tally up 1,899 days. And it's just about to turn night, so when we sleep it'll be day 1,900. And once I woke up, I instantly got to work. On day 1, I built a general outline using dirt of the area I wanted to build. The main goal for these 100 days is to make this side of the village look just a bit better. I then spent days 2 to 5 placing dirt down, filling up the area we had just made. I'd actually spent the past week planning and collecting a bunch of resources just for this video, and as you can see, we've got quite a lot to play around with. On day 6, I headed back to refill on dirt and fireworks, and I noticed that there were Christmas themed chests. I never knew this was a thing, and it was actually a really nice surprise. But after that, I continued filling dirt down on the opposite side, and after fighting off hordes of zombies on day 8, I continued placing the dirt down until we had finally finished on day 13.
Oh my god, finally we're done. Oh, that took so long. And you can see the grass is slowly starting to cover over the dirt, so what I'm going to do to speed it up a bit is I'm going to throw down a little bit of grass blocks, and that should speed up the process quite a bit. Alright, that is almost a stack down, and that should speed it up a little bit.
I decided that I wanted some mountains to cut across the land we had just placed down, a bit like what we've already done on the opposite side. So on day 14, I made a basic and quick outline of the mountains. I put on a couple of podcasts and started placing down the stone. Halfway through, I got attacked by a horde of zombies again. What is going on? But anyway, I continued until day 19, where I noticed that the vast majority of the dirt had finally turned to grass blocks. While finishing off some detailing, I realised that the current farm hasn't even fully grown after 3 months. I don't tend to go in this area too often, so this probably explains why it's taken so long to grow. On day 21, I removed a couple of spruce trees that were kind of in the way of where I wanted to build next. Once they were gone, I started to carve out a path where I wanted the river to be. At the end of the day, I started to place down a couple of bits of dirt for the river bed. I continued this throughout the next day until a creeper scared me and I went to bed and waited for the mobs to despawn. On the following day, I started to build up the water, and a wandering trader also showed up, but he didn't really have too much, so I did what was necessary. And then on day 24, I'd finally finish off the river. On the next day, I found this really cool windmill design by a guy called Mechatech, and I think it would fit in perfectly with the rest of the map. So far in this world, I've only made one biome, and I think it's getting a bit repetitive. So today, I wanted to change that. On day 28, I attempted to build an old growth pine taiga biome, and after dedicating 2 days to building it up and throwing down a couple of bits of grass and smaller boulders just to make it look a bit more crowded, it really did feel like it was finished. On the next few days, I placed down a couple of paths connecting the farmhouse to the rest of the village, using the exact same path design as we've used in other videos. Then from days 34 all the way up to day 40, I started placing down the surrounding farmland, and this actually took so much longer than I first thought. I spent day 41 tidying up this untouched area next to the pond, and turned it into a little garden area. Definitely not because I ran out of saplings to fill in this area. On day 42, I decided to start something that I've kind of been putting off for the past 3 months. That being, finishing off these cliffs. At the moment, they're kind of just big slabs of cobblestone, and could really do with a makeover. So I launched up a creative copy of the world, and started messing around with it in World Edit, until I made a couple of cool outlines, retextured it, and imported the design into the world. Once the design was slotted into place, I started to build up the cliffs using a thing called Lightmatica's Easy Place, which makes building 10 times easier. Instead of accurately placing each block in the right place, all you need to do is hold down the right mouse button and go over each block. In this mode, it cycles through the correct block in your inventory for you, so it really speeds up the building process. And not gonna lie, I kinda wish I knew about this easy place mode beforehand, as this would have been incredibly useful for building up earlier projects. I continued building until day 47, where I finished off the first cliff. I then set up the schematic for the next cliff, picked up some more rockets, replenished my pickaxe as I realised a lot of cobblestone needs to be destroyed before we can start building the next cliff. So on day 48, I started chipping away at the cliff. I was also visited by a wandering trader, but once again, he didn't really have too much to offer, so, like last time, I did what was necessary. And at this point here, on day 50, we are officially halfway through the challenge. And it was here where disaster struck. No! Cock. After recovering the vast majority of my stuff, I continued mining away the cliffs, and by day 52, we had got rid of everything that needed to be destroyed. I then spent the next 6 days finishing off the cliff, and I think it turned out really well. Then on day 59, I covered up a bit of the lake with dirt so that a path could run in between the lake and the cliff. I also found a bit of extra time in the day to deepen part of the lake. On the next day, I built up a path leading on the cliff and threw down a bit of seagrass in the lake. On day 61, I noticed that there was a random carrot in the wheat field. I have no idea how this got here, so I changed it out. I then headed back to the base and used the mob farm to grind for a bit of XP to replenish my elytra and shovel. After doing that, I then headed back and started to work on a bridge. I found a pretty decent design by F-Whip and kind of wanted to build it in this world. So I dedicated the next 3 days to do just that. I spent the next few days placing down a couple of paths and decorating the area with trees and grass. I also made this little beach area, and this was the first time building with sand in this world, which was quite fun. On day 69, I made an outer wall to an extra farmland area I wanted to build, and on the next day I finished that off. I then spent the next few days finishing off paths, adding in some extra trees and grass, just to fill up some of the empty spaces. On day 75, I wanted to build up some more beaches like what we did earlier on the banks of the lake. So I made my way to an end duper, duplicated some sand, and made my way back to the base. I then placed all the sand down. On day 77, I wanted to make this lake look a bit more like a lake. So I loaded up a creative copy of the world and used World Edit to make a very simple lake bed design. Textured it using dirt and coarse dirt, I then slotted the design into place. But in the meantime, I had realised that I had to drain this entire lake before we could start building. And since we can't get sponges in Superflat, the only feasible way to do this is by placing blocks and then destroying them. And I had to dedicate 8 days to do this. Finally, on day 86, I was able to start building up the lake, and this was actually really satisfying to do. And after 2 days, we were ready to place down all the water. Surprisingly, you only need 2 buckets of water to do this. And from what I found, the easiest way to do this is to start from the lowest layer and go up once the lower layer is finished. And I was working on this non-stop until day 93, where it was finally done. Then it was day 94, and these next few days went by really quickly, and there were still quite a few things I wanted to get done. The first thing I wanted to get done was place down bits of seagrass at the bottom of the lake floor, but I also put down a few pieces of crying obsidian just to make the lake glow a bit more at night, and blended it in with a bit of grey concrete. On day 95, I built a mini dock on the side of the lake, and dedicated the next few days building up a mini boat in the middle of the lake. And this design was inspired by a creator called Nexi, and I thought it would fit in quite nicely with the rest of the world. Through days 98 and 99, I wanted to build a couple of smaller structures, like wagons, hay bales and barrels, just to finish off the area and make it feel a bit more complete. And before I realised it, it was day 100, and I spent this entire day looking at everything we've built in this short span of time.
How's it going? In real life, Peter Griffin here telling you to subscribe to Dim Dam Dom.